welcome to Why Wasn't It Better? I'm your host, Patrick Darms.
I'm your co-host, Tom Paradiso.
And we have a return guest making the second appearance in the same season, Tom Paradiso. Welcome back.
Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you both. So I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk about this film.
Yeah. Film.
Generous of you.
Objectively, it is a film.
Yeah, it is, technically. It was released in the cinema, as they say in Britain. I wonder if Britain even had this film. They might have screened it and were just like, no, thank you.
Didn't make it overseas, perhaps?
That's something I am kind of curious about. Did Seagal have an overseas presence? I mean, we know he did in Russia eventually when he became a citizen.
Later in life.
Yeah, later in life.
I'll jump right in on that. I was trying to use some AI to do a little research. I mean, these days I feel like whenever you're researching anything, it's worth an input into AI. One of the chats would not return anything on Steven Seagal because he's a political figure. And for the time being, they're not returning any political feedback. I'm not going to name the chat that I was using, but
that's really funny.
I found that interesting and also frustrating because at first I thought it was mistaken. It would tell me about the movie. It just wouldn't tell me about Steven Seagal.
That is awfully generous of the AI to consider him a political figure. I wouldn't even give him that courtesy.
Yeah,
a little bit.
That's a lot, but
this is the first Steven Seagal movie that we're going to be covering on the podcast, and safe to say there won't be many. Not many of his films meet the criteria for Why Wasn't It Better, because well, we're going to get into it, but it was over real quick for him, wasn't it? I'll intro this for us. His battle to save the Alaskan wilderness and protect its people can only be won on deadly ground. That's the actual tagline of the film. I didn't just create that for the episode. But the plot of this film is as follows. Forrest Taft, great name, is putting his considerable talents as a fighter and marksman to use as a hired gun for the sleazy oil tycoon Michael Jennings. The latter's bottom line tunnel vision has him destroying entire communities if it means a bigger profit for his business. While in Alaska taking care of some business for his amoral boss, Taft meets a native Eskimo woman who helps him to discover the error of his ways and pursue a more righteous path. So basically, it's the plot of Killers of the Flower Moon. Even though I haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm just going to assume that's correct. On Deadly Ground was released on February 18th, 1994 by Seagal/Nassau Productions and Warner Brothers. It was directed by Steven Seagal. The screenplay was written by Ed Horowitz and Robin U. Rusin. Sounds like a made-up name. Starring Steven Seagal, Michael Caine, Joan Chen, John C. McGinley, R. Lee Ermey, Shari Shattuck, and Billy Bob Thornton. The budget was $50 million, that is $105 million adjusted for inflation. And the box office was $78 million, that is $165 million adjusted for inflation. Tom, as today's guest, why did you agree to participate in this week's discussion of On Deadly Ground?
So I'd say it was not long into my viewing of the movie that I was questioning why I agreed. And if I really wanted to invest 100 or so minutes of my life into rewatching this movie. I very quickly remembered why maybe I hadn't revisited it since seeing it the first time. But to get to the question, when I was a kid, I did martial arts, and because of that, I did martial arts. My parents did. My brother and sister did. We saw like every martial arts movie that was out there, and his first couple were pretty entertaining. I was into like teenage years, so the violence was appealing. He seemed to, in those first couple of years to like a 10 to 15-year-old kid, he seemed like a cool adult, or at least, like he had cool skills. So this was just like the next Seagal movie that came out. And I remember that it wasn't what I would have called one of my favorite Seagal movies, but I didn't remember how awful it was and how much maybe I didn't really like it. And I was quickly reminded once I put it on.
I'm sure I had seen this at some point when I was younger, but I didn't remember any details about it. Because I didn't necessarily remember Michael Caine, and I feel like that's something you would have remembered because he's such a well-known actor. But then at the same time, this was around the time where a lot of Seagal's movies were starting to blend together.
This was it after this.
This was a turning point for his career in a lot of different ways that we're going to get into, but I'm glad you touched on it because, you're older than myself and Anton. So you remember, like, it's almost impossible to explain to someone younger now, but like there really was a time where Seagal was a big action star in Hollywood.
He was. I don't necessarily know how he got there. To the prior point about this, when they started to blend together, I probably combined On Deadly Ground and Fire Down Below in my memory as one movie. And this was it. This was the start. Like, I clearly remember the first couple up till Under Siege. Like, those all stood out. They were different enough. They were good enough that I probably saw them a few times. But then this is where I was like, nope, they can't all be hits, or at least watchable or films.
I will stand by his first few films. I still think they are pretty entertaining. I've seen a couple of them. Like I watched Under Siege fairly recently. It's a far cry from something like Die Hard, but it's entertaining.
Yeah,
And,
like you said, Pat. No doubt, he was a big star in the early '90s. Unwarranted.
Yeah.
Well, even looking at some of those early ones, I didn't watch any of them. They're surprisingly not available. Not surprisingly, not available on most streaming platforms that I have access to. But what really stood out in looking at them was Above the Law being his first film. He was a producer on that, and that was his debut. And I don't know if you know why, if it came up in here, but I didn't look into it too far. But I know he was on the Hollywood scene. I've heard about his involvement on stunts, but going straight into like a starring role and producing credit on that movie that stood out to me.
I know a little bit about it. I've done some reading on this, but you're right about like being involved in stunts. I mean, prior to him actually starring in on Above the Law, his biggest claim to fame was that he once broke Sean Connery's wrist while working as a stunt coordinator on Never Say Never Again. The best way to sum it up is he just happened to know the right people. He befriended a pretty big Hollywood producer whose name escapes me at the time. But to your point, to be a co-producer on your first film is exceedingly rare. The main thing for the studios at that time, and the major difference between his first few movies and this one, is that they were very inexpensive. They were very low budget films, which is, not like this one at all. Like $50 million was no joke in 1994. But this was very much the turning point in his career. Under Siege was a legitimate blockbuster when it came out in 1992, and I think most people would agree that's his best film. Certainly his most well-known film, I would think. He got to star in and direct this, which to date remains his first and only directorial effort. And I find that interesting because of all the direct-to-video stuff that he's done in the past 20 years, he hasn't directed any of them. And you would think someone with the ego of Steven Seagal that we all know about, I find it curious that he hasn't directed anything since.
He may have a passion project in the works.
He may.
Another passion project.
Anton, had you seen this film before we did this episode?
Oh yeah, I mean, big action movie star. There's no way I would have missed his earlier films. Under Siege is a fantastic action movie for what it's worth, but I think that it's fair to say Steven Seagal has a bit of a reputation, and nowadays it's really looking at a lot of his films and knowing him for the qualities that we get on Deadly Ground, on and off the set.
Yeah, at this point, 30 years later, he is an absolute joke. Just looking at a picture of him, it is actually laughable. I hadn't seen any pictures of him recently until doing the research for this episode, and it was very amusing to say the least.
I think that's a little harsh, Pat. I mean, he's dedicated to his craft. I mean,
is he?
You know his film A Contract to Kill?
I'm not familiar with that one, but
go on. He gained 60 pounds for the role. No one asked him to.
That's Russell Crowe dedication.
Did you know that he is actually a quarter Cherokee? He weighs 1/4 of a Jeep Cherokee. Thank you, Steven Seagal facts.
Oh, don't worry. Wait till we talk about the racial ambiguity of this man. Back to this film On Deadly Ground. Michael Caine would have been a big deal at the time. He was already an Academy Award winner by the time he starred in this film. So, Tom, I think you were alluding to this earlier. Did you see this in the theater?
No, I wouldn't have seen it in the theater. This was like I said, all martial arts movies, we saw them all. But the Steven Seagal ones were when we saw later on, because first I did karate, like traditional karate martial art. But then once I started doing Aikido, he was the Aikido guy. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't until I was a little bit older. So didn't see this one in the theater, but probably saw it immediately on VHS. Because I was probably old enough for our movies, but my siblings were not. But they were the type of movie we would all enjoy together. So, even though my brother might have been only like 9 or 10 years old, he was still watching the barroom fight scene, no problem.
Well, this film ended up being a very expensive gamble for Warner Brothers. It was a total failure at the box office. It made $35 million in North America, which is pretty awful.
We did see Executive Decision. Oh, actually, Under Siege 2 was next, right?
It was
We saw that
after this one.
We saw that in
Yeah.
the theater.
You know,
We
I
saw
have a
that in the
soft
theater.
spot for that movie.
Yeah, and then
Don't know why, but I do.
Executive Decision was another theater movie.
Yeah, and do you know the context of why he was in Executive Decision?
It was his IOU, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll get into it more. And it's like, at this point, too, it's like, would you even classify this as a martial arts film?
No.
No, like, not
There's
really.
there's a lot of Aikido wrist action, but
Yeah,
not really.
It's
an action
like
film
an action
with
film
martial arts in it.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, didn't do well at the box office. Didn't do well with the critics either. A 14% Rotten Tomatoes score, which is that's impressively bad. And if you want some entertainment, the Siskel and Ebert review of this is available on YouTube. And I'd say normally Siskel and Ebert were pretty. They were measured for the most part. They were pretty respectful with a lot of films that they even films that they hated, but they did not hold back with this one, and it's pretty entertaining. I remember this film being a staple of the bargain bin at Walmart on DVD in like the early 2000s. This was always one of those like maybe not even $5 movies. It was like $2 or $3. Where if you were just if you were feeling like you wanted to like beef up your DVD collection, you'd buy it.
The 2-pack. It's on Amazon.
Yes.
It's on Amazon. The hard copy is a 2-pack because while I was searching for a place to actually view this film, the Amazon listing for the DVD 2-pack came up.
And what's the other side of the 2-pack?
I don't
Probably
remember.
Fire Down Below, right?
I don't remember for certain. It was one of the early ones, but not one of the first 5.
Okay.
So it was not necessarily like an appealing 2-pack either.
Fire Down Below had a similar like nature outdoors western-y type of thing going on, right?
Yeah.
Is Fire Down Below even worse than this movie? I think it might
think
be,
so,
right?
but I don't know if I could watch it again.
I know.
After this, I'm traumatized. I have extreme hesitation around starting watching even the early movies. Like Under Siege, I would do, but I don't know. Like, is Above the Law really as good as I remember, or is it not?
How good do you remember it being?
I remember liking it. My guess is I might reverse that decision.
I've seen it kind of recently. It's fine. Because this was before he was taking himself as seriously as he is in this movie.
Yeah, to me, it's more like a Rumble in the Bronx, like that type of Jackie Chan movie where, you've got a pretty legitimate action star in a movie that's good enough and not taking itself too seriously. So you get what you want from it. And that's martial arts movies. That's all we wanted. We just wanted some cool martial arts scenes.
But is that the problem? Steven Seagal just takes himself way too seriously.
It's one of them, for sure. And the other one too, which again we'll get to this in the reasons, but Jackie Chan got his ass kicked in all of his movies, and Seagal didn't, and that hasn't aged well. Let's do the production history of this film, which is, as you would imagine, not too long. There's not a ton of information. There hasn't been a lot of writing on this one. This was somewhat of a passion project for Seagal. He insisted on directing it. Warner Brothers agreed to allow him to do so in exchange for him starring in Under Siege 2: Dark Territory, which came out the following year. This movie was not his first choice to direct. 20th Century Fox and Morgan Creek Productions initially offered him the mafia drama Man of Honor as a starring director writing vehicle, but Fox didn't want to pay over $30 million for the project, so production shut down a few weeks before filming. So yeah, just to reiterate this, believe it or not, there was a period of time when Steven Seagal had the luxury of choosing his own projects, which I think subsequently ended with this film. Jeremy Irons was originally cast as Michael Jennings. Anthony Hopkins and Alan Rickman were sought to replace him before Michael Caine stepped in. I think any of those would have been probably pretty good. In addition to the credited writers, Chris Girolamo, David Goyer, there's a name we know, and Mitchell Kapner also did work on the screenplay. Goyer did uncredited rewrites on the script, mainly reworking Michael Caine's dialogue. And this is one of the craziest things that I've seen in a crappy movie like this. The director of the Aegis oil commercial is played by none other than Irvin Kershner. I have no idea how he became involved in his cameo in this film. I admittedly didn't spend too much time Googling it, but just the fact that Irvin Kershner is somehow in this movie is baffling to me. Action scenes were both added and deleted for this film. Originally, the pole fight in the finale of the film was not intended. Warner Brothers pressured Seagal to add more fight scenes to make the film more like the traditional Seagal films. A fight scene in the cave during the dream sequence was cut, a publicity photo of which exists. Numerous magazines from the time period reported that even though Seagal's black belt students were on set, they were seldom used until more sequences were added. Seagal filmed almost 40 minutes of footage for the environmental message at the end of the movie, and he planned to use it all in the final cut. Of course he did. After pressure from Warner Brothers and a disastrous preview screening, where audience members booed, laughed, and made obscene gestures for the entire sequence, Seagal cut the final scene down to about 7 minutes. The budget got out of control when bigger and more explosive action sequences were written into the screenplay. A former Warner Brothers executive later stated that Seagal lost his director's salary due to the film going over budget. Now, the studio agreed to forgive his loss and pay the salary, but in exchange, Seagal had to agree to play the supporting role that he did in Executive Decision, which that is a film I think we're going to do in the podcast, actually, Executive Decision, because I have not seen that since I was a kid, and I'm curious if that holds up. I could see it not. Have either of you seen that fairly recently?
It's been a
No.
minute.
Yeah, probably in agreement on that. It's like, does that hold up? It's like, probably not.
Probably not.
I don't think these were intended to.
No.
It was intended to be entertaining for 90 to 100 minutes. That's all you need.
I mean, I watched Rumble in the Bronx pretty recently. Held up. It was just fun.
All the Jackie Chan stuff holds up, in my opinion. You're right. They're just fun.
Yeah.
Before we talk about why wasn't this better, we'll take a break as we hear from one of our sponsors. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. So discussing this film, why wasn't this one better? We have to start with the man himself, Steven Seagal. Always his own worst enemy. He's what's known as a pseudo-intellectual. There's a lot of stuff we know about him at this point. He has been the subject of so many memes, so many jokes, so many negative stories on, celebrity podcasts and just YouTube videos. I feel like at this point, I've probably heard more bad stories about Steven Seagal than I have watched Steven Seagal movies.
Yeah, I mean, knowing that there's so much out there, for what's something that sticks out to you, Pat and Tom, about Steven Seagal out there that's like, wow, that is incredible that that's true about him.
At this point, I think we're so accustomed to it that it doesn't surprise you anymore. Like each escalating thing, I don't know. His relationship with Putin seems to be the most outlandish one, that he would try and become a political figure that way.
That's the cherry on top.
Yeah, it's like jumping the shark times 10. I thought, I'm remembering back in the day when he became like a deputy and had the reality show.
Yeah, Lawman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was like, can you believe Steven Seagal is doing this? Because, again, like going back to martial arts, like when my whole family was doing Aikido, he was like a celebrity for Aikido. So it was, there was some respect with that. Also given like his 7th degree black belt that he had in the art. I mean, you don't get that overnight, no matter what you're like mentally. So that took work, and there was a level of respect there. There also, the lore of his martial arts action style was that he's so fast they don't have to speed the tape up when he does the action. I distinctly remember like someone talking about that, like one of the teachers, like he's just so fast. And he's so strong and so violent that like the normal stunt guys can't handle working with him. They have to bring in his stunt guys so they don't get hurt. That's probably true. Not necessarily by the nature of anything special about him, more just about the specificity of Aikido and being able to like receive the move without actually getting your wrist broken.
I believe it because he's listed at 6'5", which
He's a big guy.
Yeah, you can see it on screen. He is definitely a big guy. And I don't want to disrespect the work that you just mentioned, because like to get even the brief success that he had in his career, like he obviously had to put in some work. Unfortunately, it's just been overshadowed by him being a legendary asshole.
Well, and also, I would assume it kind of went to his head a bit. I mean, that happens, I think. I'm not to generalize, but in some martial arts, you become the sensei, the teacher, you command respect. And you start to expect that level of respect outside of the dojo in everyday life. And in order to kind of elicit that response from more than just your students, you start to act a certain way. And it's, a little fish out of water maybe, or just, not realizing where you are and what's appropriate.
One of the things I've read about him too is that he didn't have the respect of a lot of other actors because he didn't quote make his bones. Like he became a sensation like pretty quickly, and he hadn't worked his way up in a more traditional way that a lot of other actors had. And I think his attitude towards everyone didn't help one bit. But when he broke through with Above the Law, I mean, you were alive then, you were tapped into it. It's like it probably did feel fresh, and like he did offer something that like was, it wasn't groundbreaking, that's not the right word, but he was a different kind of action star at the time. He wasn't this muscle bound Schwarzenegger, Stallone type of guy. He was something different.
Yeah, there's a few comparisons when I think about action stars, and there's of course like action stars like Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, and the difference between action stars like that and Steven Seagal is what kind of mythos is built around them as like actual tough guys. So someone that is considered like the toughest of tough guys, of course, right, was Bruce Lee. His own stunts, like, actual kung fu master. And for Steven Seagal, there was a lot on his part to really build up that mythos for him. And as him being a tough guy, actual tough guy in Hollywood, which I'm sure rubbed people the wrong way, the more and more he tried to convince people of that.
I think the problem with him was threefold, all of which you can see in this film on Deadly Ground. Mainly, I think the whole thing just went stale for him. But the first reason really is he can't act his way out of a paper bag. He had no range. I always get really annoyed whenever I hear someone say that Schwarzenegger was a bad actor. Steven Seagal is the first example that I will cite to prove that Schwarzenegger is a good actor. Just to compare the two, right? Arnold was obviously physically intimidating, but Arnold did all different kinds of material. He had tons of chemistry with his co-stars. He had real comedic chops. Seagal makes him look like Marlon Brando. Seagal might as well be an animatronic in this film. He has no sense of humor, even when he tries to crack jokes. He has no sexual chemistry with any of his female co-stars. He has no charisma to speak of. Every single thing in this film feels forced. Every line, zabba, zabba, zabba. That's how he talks the whole time. No range whatsoever.
So is there a way to think of this that, I give some of the credit to the director, and if he doesn't know how to direct himself, a good director can make up for that, right?
It's interesting because I try to think of other performances that kind of are very dry, but like no nonsense characters. Charles Bronson was, of course, very well known for being very stone-faced, giving very dry performances. And I always kind of thought of Steven Seagal as giving a very caricature of a Charles Bronson performance.
Like some kind of a bad tribute band.
Exactly.
Like he's trying to be Clint Eastwood a little bit, yeah. Dirty Harry.
Yeah, like I said, he just wants to build himself up as a tough guy. So he thinks about tough guys that have been in Hollywood.
And it's not really clear what kind of tough guy he's trying to be. Like when he steps off the helicopter and he lights the little cigar and he's got that Native American, it's some kind of native,
the jacket,
Western jacket on. It's like, I don't know what he's going for here. Like, I'm not sure.
He sticks his face into the fire to light the tiny cigar. Gets right in there. Not a cool move at all.
He's also drinking from a flask at various points through the film. So I'm like, is he an alcoholic? Like, what do they do? I just can't figure it out. He couldn't either.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, this is the point that I tried to touch on earlier. The action got stale really quick. He never gets hit. He never takes any damage. That's fine in one or two films, but it gets boring pretty quickly. And it's pretty much the antithesis of any other action star, which we talked about Jackie Chan earlier. Or a good example is like Bruce Willis in Die Hard. He gets his ass kicked. He bleeds all over the place. He gets hit a ton. He has to overcome all these physical odds all around him using a variety of methods. And that's always been Jackie Chan's thing too, right? Think about any movie Jackie Chan's in where he's doing all these incredible stunts. He's getting punched and kicked in the face left and right. But with Seagal in this film, does anyone land a hit on him in this film? I don't think so.
No,
he doesn't get that first bar fight. He's not touched.
No, they're all attacking him one at a time.
Yeah, either he's completely manhandling them or he's shooting them with a shotgun. So they couldn't even get close to give him a fair fight.
He's fighting like special forces mercenaries and no one can hit him. And so
He's
by the
too
time
fast.
this film came out, it's the 6th iteration of this. There's no tension in any of the action scenes.
No, and just shows his just inexperience with proper story development or how to build character development over time for like a character to overcome his enemies or to kind of go through some sort of hardship or inability to defeat an enemy, but then maybe learn that or overcome that. But instead, it really just pounds home, and this aligns with Steven Seagal's mentality. It's even in the dialogue in the film. How often are they just talking up like how much of a badass Forrest is?
They do it quite a bit, and it's just laughable.
And just replace the name Forrest with Steven Seagal, and I'm sure it's just very self-serving for him.
That's the last reason, right, of the problem with this is how seriously he took this. If he had just loosened up a bit and not taken things so seriously, like Arnold, right? The thing with Schwarzenegger is Schwarzenegger very early on was aware of how ridiculous he sounded and was. And you always got that feeling with Schwarzenegger that he was just joking around with you just a little bit, unless it was something like the Terminator, where if you go back and watch the first Terminator, he's like legitimately chilling in that movie. It's one of the reasons why it's so cool. But in his later movies, like Total Recall, like you just know the whole time he's like, yeah, this is ridiculous. I know, right? But Seagal probably thought that he was making some kind of Citizen Kane here. And apparently he thinks quite highly of this film all these years later. He thinks it's one of the most important things that he's ever done. The key word there being important. He thinks this is an important film. I would say this about the story. This is an absolutely terrible movie. I think the story, there's nothing wrong with it inherently. Like the plot of this film, if you take Seagal out and you drop in Arnold or Stallone or Bruce Willis, this is a way better movie.
Do you mean just like as a template of like an action movie?
Yeah, where he's like an oil worker and there's corruption and he decides to fight against it. I think if you take out the Eskimo sequence too, you'd have to remove that.
Oh yeah, I mean this fits a template of what I would expect out of any late 80s, early 90s action film. Like,
yeah,
what's Roadhouse? It's or what is even Mortal Kombat?
Right. And that's why Seagal's the biggest problem with this movie. Take him out, put a better actor in. I wouldn't call it a good movie, but it would be far more watchable. Actually, Tom, I'm looking at the run up to this. You might be right. Above the Law, Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, Out for Justice, and then Under Siege. It's like, how many of them are actually good? Maybe 2.
Maybe 2.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Out for Justice and Above the Law. Or the other funny part with those is that he's an LA guy, but those are New York movies. Oh, actually, one's Chicago. I think Out for Justice is Chicago and Above the Law is New York, or the other way around. But they're different. Like you can, I remember Hard to Kill. I remember was like, whoa, this is not as good as the other ones. Although Kelly LeBrock's in it, so there maybe get a point or two there. And then Marked for Death was like back then that was the like almost borderline scary violent one. At least that's my recollection.
I don't even remember it. They even the titles start to bleed together. You're like, which one is that? You were like what? New York. I mean Chicago. Yeah. I
just
don't know.
Like change the city, change it a little bit. Same background, same skill set.
Is that the one where he plays Gino or Nico or something like
Gino
that?
Felino.
Gino Felino. Can't forget.
Oh man.
Jerry Orbach's in that movie from Law and Order.
Someone had to show up for a paycheck.
There were good casts working with him
throughout his films.
Yeah, I mean, Under Siege had Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey.
Under Siege was an Oscar-nominated film.
That's right. It was. Is it the only Seagal film nominated for an Oscar?
As far as I know.
I mean, it's sound categories, but Oscars are Oscars.
We'll take it. And that's where Seagal was working with people around him that maybe, of course, had the decision-making powers versus here where we got all Seagal 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, Under Siege had a real director. Andrew Davis directed The Fugitive the next year. Like, that's one of the best movies ever made. Like, he's a real director. So I think I already know how we're going to answer this, but this is a good discussion question. Is On Deadly Ground the film where Steven Seagal officially became a joke? He was never looked at the same way after this film. And if you look at his filmography before and after this film, it is a major turning point for him.
It's close, I think. That he recovered a bit. It was kind of like
briefly,
not full joke, but it was like, oh, this guy's going the wrong way.
Yeah.
if
Under
you take
Siege
out
2 made a good amount of money.
Under Siege 2 made good money, and then like I'll admit, like Glimmerman and Exit Wounds, they were watchable once. I haven't seen
Once.
it
Yeah, it's like
since.
Glimmerman. Is that the one he did with Damon Wayans or
Damon
Marlon?
Wayans,
Damon
yeah.
Wayans.
Yeah,
You're
but
calling that watchable? It was watchable at a certain
I
time.
watched it. I don't know if I could watch it again, but I did watch it.
no, it's fair to say though, on Deadly Ground, this is where you get the most vulnerable Steven Seagal you're gonna get very early on in his career. He legit thought this was good.
He thought it was a really important environmental message that he was making.
I wonder what gave that away.
I mean, that for that reason alone, it should be shown at film schools.
What not to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest that like watching this movie, there were parts of it where it's like, this feels like to me like horror movies from the 70s where you knew they were low budget, you accepted they were low budget, but there was some redeeming quality. Like the story was good, the violence was over the top, and I'm talking about the horror movies. This had none. It didn't have the like negative, but there was one thing that was interesting about it. Like there's nothing.
And it cost $50 million.
And it cost 50 million. It wasn't made for nothing.
Right. That's why I'm a little bit kinder to something like Above the Law, because I think the budget for that was like $5 million. It was something tiny, and you're like, oh, that's like pretty good for $5 million. So this is what happens after this film on Deadly Ground. So he rebounds a little bit with Under Siege 2. Executive decision. He's a supporting character in that. I don't even know if we can count that, but that was also a hit. Glimmerman didn't make money. Fire Down Below didn't make money. Then he makes The Patriot, which I have no idea what that even is, but that ended up as being his first direct-to-video release film in 1998. Have you even heard of that? I have no idea what that is.
I've heard of it. I can't say that I've seen it.
Then we get to the turn of the millennium. It gets even worse for him. Exit Wounds, which some people like. Ticker, never seen it. Half Past Dead, some people like it. And then this is when he just gets permanently relegated to direct-to-video land. So by 2002, it's completely over for him. And I think that's around the same time that he befriended Vladimir Putin and acquired Russian citizenship.
Was it even direct-to-video? I know we're talking about ancient history, but there was direct-to-video where you might be able to rent it at Blockbuster, but then there was like direct-to-video where it's like in a bargain bin at a truck stop, and not even like direct-to-video for general release to the United States. It's like direct-to-video. There's an audience for this actor abroad, so we'll make enough money pumping these things out and selling them at some country where they love Steven Seagal.
I think he started off in that upper tier of direct-to-video, kind of like Wesley Snipes did when Snipes' career started to slide. But I guess, yeah, I use the term relegated. It is kind of like the European soccer system where there really are levels to this. Like the Premier League is like theater releases. The Championship is like indie films. The third tier is direct-to-video where you're like, yeah, you could rent it at Blockbuster. And then, yeah, the fourth tier, like he's doing direct-to-video still. But to your point, Tom, that means direct-to-streaming now. And it's like, I haven't seen any of his stuff ever pop up on streaming. Well, maybe it's not in my algorithm, but it must be in other territories like Asia and stuff.
Well, he did come back with 2016 Sniper Special Ops.
Oh, you're right. I should have remembered that one.
Featuring ECW champion Rob Van Dam.
Most of his stuff is, I mean, was he he didn't even make it to the Expendables.
No.
Most of his stuff is on Tubi, it looks. I mean, there's stuff on other streamers as well, but a lot of Tubi stuff.
And he had to pay them to get on there.
Probably.
Allegedly. There has to be some market for it still because like he makes a lot of them. He hasn't really slowed down. I was surprised to look at his filmography. I was expecting to see like a 5-year gap somewhere, and there hasn't really been one. So somebody's watching it. Maybe we're overthinking this. Maybe it's the Russian market. A lot of people in Russia. He's a national hero there for whatever reason.
Was he in Machete? Sorry.
Machete?
Was he in Machete?
I think he was. It sounds familiar. That's not good, is it?
If he was, that's a pretty big film to be in.
That's a big film.
Huh.
I don't remember if I even saw that one.
I don't think I've seen it. I might have. I had a thought watching this film the other day. Do you think he got the idea to dye his hair jet black from Michael Caine in this film? It's like, that's it. That's what I want to go for. Zabba, zabba, zabba.
Just decided to stick with it.
Because Caine's hair in this film is a work of art.
I kept looking for like a stream of dye running down his forehead.
When he starts sweating.
Yeah, when he's sweating.
Or when he uses all his brain power to switch accents from Cockney British to some kind of Middle American.
Oh, he was fighting real hard not to, or was he fighting real hard because it just kept flowing between British through fake Southern.
Yes, semi-Southern. He was a real hands-on CEO. Did you notice that? Like, he was involved in like every aspect of the the oil rig process. It's like, does a CEO need to be that hands-on? We're trashing this film, obviously. He's been in far, far worse. That's the crazy thing. I would say I haven't seen any of his direct-to-video stuff. I would imagine it makes this look like Die Hard.
It gets so I have, seen a couple of his direct to streaming stuff, and it's just a joke. You just watch it because it's a joke.
He can
But
barely move, right?
He can barely move. I don't think he really knows how to operate a gun based on how he's firing those things in the movie. In Sniper Special Ops, he's looking down. He's looking into his scope, but clearly the cover's still on, and that is in the movie. And I feel like, though, this has to be his best worst film, if that makes sense, because there's so many bad ones, but this has to be his best worst one because of the complete sincerity he put into this film, like the care he put in to try to make something fantastic, and he still ends up making just a huge miss.
That's what I couldn't process when I was rewatching this. I'm like, wow, this is like astoundingly bad, and it's not even close to the bottom of the barrel. It actually made me like reassess some of my like rankings for films, because I was like, this is like an F-. I'm like, well, it can't be. There's so much worse than this. He made 38 films since 2003. Now, granted, I think some of them have been cameos, but if like 38 films in 20 years he's working.
He's working. I mean, do we have to even just like kind of give credit to those films that were made that were like direct to streaming? Nicolas Cage is kind of a similar actor in that not a lot of people know that he was in a lot of like direct to DVD or direct to streaming films in between like his big Hollywood films. I don't really count those just because there's not a really high expectation for them to be good. But when you have a budget like this, there's a bit of an expectation, right?
$50 million? Yeah. I
Right.
think the point you made earlier, is this the best, worst film he's in? Yeah, I think it is. Also, I'm willing to forgive Nicolas Cage because, number one, people seem to like Cage, and number two, we know he had stuff that he had to pay for.
Yeah, like his
yes, it's public knowledge.
Yeah.
The payments on his pyramid tomb in New Orleans.
Yeah. I'm not even saying this to be mean. Like, the guy, he made some unwise purchases. He took whatever work was coming his way. I will never hold that against an actor. But with Seagal, I don't know that he had stuff to pay for like that. He just wanted the work.
Lawsuits, is that fair? He had to really save the money for that?
Did he have a couple of those?
Yeah, I think.
There's a long conversation we could have about his personal life. We don't need to get into it. It's probably a subject for another podcast, but yeah, he's a legendary asshole for a lot of different reasons.
Yep.
His character in this film, Forrest Taft. So I'd say second worst Forrest character in a movie of 1994, right? It's not better than Forrest Gump.
Yeah, second worst.
Second best, not second worst.
Yeah, second best. Second, yes. Is his character supposed to be Native American?
Yes, he even counts himself as a native in the film.
When does he say that?
In the bar, he says that's a point for the natives because.
Oh, right. This is after he outbullies the bully.
I just felt bad for that.
I really felt bad for Mike Starr after a while. You're like, geez, man, like just knock him out and get it done. Forrest Taft is a bad name. Automatically makes him sound stupid. I wrote down all the other character names that he's played over the years. This is a complete list. So let's run through this. We don't have to rank them because there's far too many, but most of these are worth pointing out. Casey Ryback, which is cool. I'll give him that. I thought this is the one I confused with the one you mentioned earlier, Tom. Nico Toscani, Mason Storm, John Hatcher, there's yours Gino Felino, Austin Travis, Jack the Glimmer Man Cole, Jack Taggart, Dr. Wesley McLaren. I mean, just him playing a doctor is just wonderful stuff. Orrin Boyd. One more time, that's Orrin Boyd. Frank Glass, Sasha Petrosevich. I think that's how he got his Russian citizenship. Jonathan Cold, Professor Robert Burns, Jake Hopper, William Lansing, pretty normal. Jack Miller, pretty normal. Travis Hunter, Chris Cody, Harlan Banks, John Seeger, Jack Foster, John Sands, Simon Ballister, Matt Conlon, Jacob King, Tal, Ruslan Drachev, Roland Salinger, Shane Daniels, Rogelio Torres. Holy shit. Paul Welland, Robert Bobby Samuels, someone named Cross, John Alexander, Paulie Trunks, Robert Sykes, Gan Sirankiri, Decker, John Harmon, John Harrison, Louder, Axe, Jake Alexander, Augusto, Augustino, Finn Adair. Even all of his character names are bad. It's actually hard to do. Like, I'm just blown away. I'm sure he came up with the names himself, like Mason Storm, Jonathan Cold.
It's just there's no way he's convincing anyone he's a professor. That's for sure.
Or a doctor. Imagine if like you like go to the emergency room and like Seagal's your doctor.
Well, McLaren sounds like a smart doctor. Dr. McLaren?
Does he look like a McLaren?
No.
Does he look like a Taft?
Maybe.
A Forrest Taft?
A Forrest. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, there's been a lot of jokes about the racial ambiguity, and I think I sent both of you this clip I found on Instagram of him in various interviews explaining his ancestry, and it's a bit contradictory, to say the least. There's not a whole lot more to say about this. The jokes write themselves here. By the way, did either of you notice there's one brief shot of him running in the film? Only one. Because Seagal running was, that was an early internet joke, the noodle arms thing he had going on. But I think
the arms thing.
Yeah, he must have been aware of it at this point, because if you go back and watch this film, not that you would or should, he is very careful about how many shots that actually show him running. And it's only one towards the end. The only reason I know this is because before my wife left, she made it about 20 minutes into this film. I was explaining to her how funny it was when Steven Seagal runs and there was nothing in the film. And for the rest of the watch, I was trying to pay attention and like call her down when it happened. And there wasn't anything to show except at the very end when he's running out of the oil refinery with Joan Chen.
He ran a lot in those early movies.
Often with no sleeves, which I don't think helped.
With like a tank top on or no sleeves.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the environmental speech at the end.
Inspiring?
It inspired me to fast forward.
Haunting?
I tried to empathize with all the extras that were in that room and probably had to sit through multiple takes of that. Because Seagal was like, no, I'm not happy with that. I think I can turn out the drama just a little bit. Zabba.
But we got the cut down version of it.
We did.
Thank goodness
for that. I wonder if the director's cut will ever be released.
Early
PowerPoint. Is this the first use of PowerPoint in a film? That was one of my takeaways. I was trying to focus on anything but what he was saying.
Oh, there were so many ways I could disassociate watching the film. I was just like, oh, wow, Dr. Cox. That's so great.
It was a Herculean task to stay focused by that point. You knew the end was coming.
Yeah.
And it couldn't come fast enough.
And it starts to be intercut with the credits, right? I think so. Like towards the end, you start to see credits, I think.
Yeah, if you don't just black out from how bad that monologue is.
I mean, look, to be honest, like I might have pulled out my phone and just started scrolling through Instagram at that point. It was real tough to pay attention. But I think it should be shown at film school, like not sarcastically, like just don't ever do this when you're making a movie.
Has there ever been just like a message just being shoved down your throat in the most on the nose way? Like there's no subtlety, no art to it. Just literally someone's just college essay.
I'm sure if I was given some time to think about it, you could probably find like worse examples of films that tried to do this. This is one of the worst high profile examples I can think of in a film. It's absurd.
It's close to learning your lesson at the end of a Captain Planet episode.
But at least those were 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is like twice as long as this monologue. I actually found his monologue to Joan Chen's character in that cabin almost like more offensive than the monologue at the end of the film, because you could explain away the end monologue as like, well, he made a presentation for all these folks, and at least he put some work in. But like, I have it written down what he says to Joan Chen that I'll recite later, and it's like he was actually putting this in the film as like a line of dialogue that one character says to another. I think she says something to him like, we shouldn't blow up an oil refinery, like more violence isn't the answer, and he just goes off for like basically a full minute, which is some of the most unrealistic stuff I've ever heard. You're both aware he made music, right?
Of course.
Yep.
2 albums.
Just a shudder, and no one should listen to his music.
Is it on Spotify? I'm curious. I'm going to check right now.
You shared something with me. Was that a YouTube clip?
The one where he's talking about his ancestry?
No, the song. His reggae. Was it a reggae song?
The reggae
Yeah,
song.
I think it had to been on Instagram where I shared it with you. But I wonder, is this available on Spotify? Probably should have looked this up before.
Your ego has to be just enormous if you'll put out a reggae album like that.
Yeah, it's on Spotify. Songs from the Crystal Cave. But that wasn't until 2004. That was when his film career was going one way, and he's like, you know what I can do? An album.
Yeah, I'd have to. You'd think he's in the he's in the recording room. He's in the studio. He has his like short cigar, puffing on it. He thinks I'm untouchable.
Probably still thinks he is. The industry changed. They don't understand me. All right. Everything else is the next reason for this film, right? I don't know what Billy Jack is. I hadn't heard of that, but this is apparently quite similar to the Billy Jack series. Are either of you familiar with that?
Western series. I haven't watched no, absolutely not. Mm-mm.
I've never heard of it. When's it from? Like the 60s?
Yeah,
70s?
I think something like that. But he was probably influenced by this. The chances of this happening are very low, but if I ever have Michael Caine on this podcast as a guest, this will be the first film that I'd like to ask him about. I don't think he'd appreciate it, but I just want to hear from him, Michael, what was it like taking direction from Steven Seagal? I mean, we all know he didn't listen to him, if at all, but there were allegations that Caine and Seagal didn't get along. I can't imagine. However, in Caine's memoir called The Elephant to Hollywood, he refuted that, saying that he liked working with Seagal and the crew, but he hated filming in Alaska. And he even joked that On Deadly Ground was an apt title for the film.
The dude just phoned it in, got his paycheck. I think he got what he wanted out of it, but
yeah,
I won't blame him for being in it.
He has a lot of paycheck roles, Michael Caine. This was I don't want to say his career was in a slump because he had won an Oscar already, but if you look at his filmography, there's a lot of bad movies. But again, you're right, Anton. We shouldn't hold that against an actor. Nonetheless, good Lord, does he phone this in? Chewing the scenery. I did enjoy the accent switch. And there's, did either of you notice this? There's a couple scenes in the refinery towards the end where he starts yelling his lines before he's even within range of the mic. You can't really hear what he's saying. Michael Caine is like, that's it. That's the only take you're getting. One take.
I particularly loved it when he was yelling about hating the stench of the animals around him on the set.
Oh, is that after he yells at Kirshner? What does he say to Kirshner? He's like, listen, if you have any good ideas, you keep them to yourself.
Yeah. Which is actually, that being written into the film is funny.
Oh, yeah. There's some, I don't want to say good comedy in this film, but there's some not bad stuff that made me chuckle. I wouldn't say I laughed. I chuckled. We got fat Billy Bob Thornton. Tom, were you blown away to see him in this?
I knew he was in there, but I didn't remember what capacity. And then seeing him was like crazy. Yeah, totally different guy. Because seeing Sling Blade, look nothing like Sling Blade. And this would have been before that, right? Wasn't Sling Blade was like 96?
Yeah, only 2 years.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna tiptoe around this. He went on some kind of crash diet.
Oh, a very popular diet in that time.
Yeah, he's like genuinely pudgy in this movie. To be honest with you, I only recognize him because of the accent. I was like, Billy Bob? I might have seen his name in the credits.
It was his voice.
Yeah.
Like, wait, this is the scene. There he is.
Yeah.
Michael Caine, to jump back, he took the 90s off.
You're looking at his filmography, right? It's awful.
Yes. The 90s until Cider House Rules, it was just like, for me, between Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and Cider House Rules, is just like 11 years of nothing.
Was Jaws the Revenge in there?
Probably.
Yeah. So we were talking about Caine actually in an episode we recorded yesterday, how we covered The Insider, and we all like Michael Caine, but he stole that Oscar from Christopher Plummer, who wasn't even nominated. Caine winning for the Cider House Rules after, in your own words, taking an entire decade off is like a what the hell from the Academy. How could you reward him for this? That movie has no legacy whatsoever. Yeah. If you look at the 1999 Oscars, who else was nominated for Best Supporting Actor? It's unfathomable that Caine won.
Maybe they were just so happy to have him back.
I get they must have really liked him, because if you get 2, that puts you on another level. A lot of people have won an Oscar, but the list of people that have won 2 for acting is not long.
Can you name them all?
No.
Jack Nicholson.
Nicholson's won 3.
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep's won 3, right?
3.
Daniel Day-Lewis, 3.
Daniel Day-Lewis,
Yeah.
3.
Acting. Did someone win 3 back in the day in like the 40s or something?
I want to say Emma
Hepburn?
Stone.
Katharine Hepburn?
Emma Stone.
Emma Stone's won 3?
Oh,
Tom Hanks,
maybe
right?
she's won, and
Tom
then
Hanks
Tom
has won
Hanks.
2.
2. Yeah.
No.
Emma Stone can't have won 3. No way.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's
no. I think she's got
just 2.
2.
Sorry, 2.
Okay. I mean, 2 still though. Like it's not a long list. You know, I just forgot we could Google this. I'm sure Katharine Hepburn's won at least a couple.
She's got 4.
4? Wow.
Katharine Hepburn, legend.
Yeah, legend. Newman only won 1. Brando's got to have 2, right?
Yep, Brando's got 2.
Yeah. De Niro's got 2. Pacino only has 1.
1.
For Son of a Woman. He didn't even win for either Godfather. It's unbelievable.
Leo.
Leo's got 1.
He's got 1.
For the wrong film.
That was just his, okay, fine, you can have 1 now.
Well, that was Pacino too, right?
Yeah, he won for Son of a Woman. You're just like, huh?
This
and then
one?
finally Denzel getting his back later.
Denzel's won too. But I know what you mean though, because like everyone that's the same year as Son of a Woman, you're just like, how did Denzel not win for Malcolm X? Like what?
How did he not win for Training Day?
He did.
Oh wait, sorry. How did he not win for Remember the Titans?
Wasn't even nominated. Crazy, right? Oh, the Oscars. It's kind of ironic we're talking about the Academy Awards in an episode about On Deadly Ground, but here we are.
I think
just a little bit off topic there.
A little bit.
It's the dichotomy. Something horrible, then we can put it up against what we consider to be good.
I mean, if you think about it, though, it's like Caine in this movie, it makes no sense whatsoever. He doesn't belong here. He knows it. He doesn't even try to belong. You know who else doesn't belong? Joan Chen looks like a hostage.
Poor Joan Chen.
She was a real star back then, too. Like, she had a better career than I think people remember. Chinese-American actress playing an Eskimo, sure.
How's that any different than an American actor playing Alaskan or Native American?
Sort of playing, yeah, it's...
Any depiction of natives in this film was just the very stereotypical Hollywood depiction back then. The dude giving the little voiceover while he's walking Steven Seagal out of the bar.
Oh, the guy, what is he? He's like, we're about to go on a great spiritual journey.
But then it's just getting muffled and covered over by the background music.
Did you know that there's another Oscar winner in this film?
Oh, yes. I remember.
Tom, this will blow your mind. The bartender is played by, in an uncredited cameo, Academy Award winner Louise Fletcher.
Really?
Like,
yes.
What the heck?
The one who's like, Forrest, don't break stuff.
Yeah.
And then he starts fighting. She's like, shit. Yes. I don't know how she ended up in this movie. She's another, like Irvin Kershner. It's like, how? Guess she needed the work, I guess. It's like, why else would you agree to appear in a Steven Seagal movie?
The dichotomy of good action films with this Steven Seagal film is when you think of Jackie Chan and using props in a film, like using a ladder as a weapon, he makes it fun and exciting. It's using it in ways that we wouldn't expect a ladder to be used in a film. Steven Seagal had that same philosophy in using a lasso in a way that we wouldn't expect you to use a lasso to attack someone.
No. It's so he even managed like that. Even was uncool.
It was just lame and disappointing.
I really do think Killers of the Flower Moon was influenced by this, and I'm being completely sarcastic right now because it definitely wasn't. But if Michael Caine's character doesn't do something or other, so the oil rights will revert back to the natives, is that clear? That's what happened.
That's about a good semblance of the plot. Yes.
Obviously, Martin Scorsese saw this film. He was like, I got it.
I know that Family Guy made fun of this with a short clip where there's Steven Seagal just attacking like seals. But
yes,
if you had a scene like that in this film, I just wouldn't bat an eye. I'm like, oh yeah, there are seals attacking him. He has to take them on just because this film is ridiculous.
There's no good performance in here, right?
I mean,
the only performance I liked was John C. McGinley.
He is bizarre in this movie.
He is, but he's watchably bizarre.
I kind of agree with you.
Because
he's playing the muscle. It's like very strange.
He was a bit of a jerk in Platoon, right? And so kind of carries over a little bit into this role. I was a bit more disappointed with Arlie Ermey's
waste
performance because exactly, it was literally say these lines I'm sure the way it was communicated by Seagal was, okay, I want you to say these lines, but do it the way that you do in that way that you do it. And Ermey's like, okay, cool, I'll do that. And it felt like there was no life behind those lines.
It was a total waste of his character. So did you notice who played McGinley's like second in command? This guy Sven Ole Thorsen. Been in a ton of stuff.
Mhm.
Usually doesn't have a lot of lines, but usually a stuntman. This is what he's been in: Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, Lethal Weapon, Predator, Running Man, Ghostbusters 2, Hunt for Red October, Terminator 2, Lethal Weapon 3, Dragon the Bruce Lee Story, Last Action Hero, Hard Target, Heat, Eraser, Jingle All the Way, Batman and Robin, 13th Warrior, End of Days. Biggest role for him is Gladiator. He plays Tigris of Gaul, the guy with wearing the mask who Maximus fights one-on-one in the arena, in the Coliseum.
Mhm.
That's Sven Ole Thorsen. The only performance I actually liked was Shari Shattuck as Lyles, Michael Jennings' lawyer. She knew exactly what kind of movie she was in. All of her lines cracked me up.
Just a good combo of making lemonade when you have a bunch of lemons.
Yeah, she has some funny lines actually. When she tells Michael Caine, Alaska is a third world country. It's just one we happen to own. And then the one that made me crack up was when Seagal starts trashing the oil refinery and she's like, "He's back." I just cracked
Just
up.
shooting it up.
And then when she dies, I was unprepared for that. You kind of think she's going to make it out when she runs out of the helicopter. And then one of the most shocking deaths I've ever seen in a movie, right? I was just completely unprepared for it. She crashes into like, I guess it's like part of the pipeline and the car just bursts into flames. It's like, what?
What's the message here? If you mess with nature, you explode.
I don't know. Because they portray her as like semi-sympathetic. I think I like her performance mostly because she's just hot, but
She was in it for the money.
yeah, and she had to die.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we can talk about some of the dialogue. We've been dancing around this.
Oof.
We don't have to talk about the environmental speech anymore. But I'm telling you that I found the script online and I wrote down this monologue, which Seagal delivers to Joan Chen in, I think it's either in the dead old man's cabin or when they go to get all the guns from like Native American John Lennon. I can't remember which, but she cautions against blowing up the refinery and just turning things over to the authorities. And this is Seagal's response. I won't do the Seagal voice because I haven't quite mastered it yet, but he says, "What do you want me to learn, Masu? Do you really think that this hocus pocus spirit stuff is going to help us now? What do you think? An angel will miraculously come down out of the sky and stop, say, 350 billion tons of oil from being spilled in our oceans every year? Maybe a ghost will stop all the cars from using gasoline. Maybe somehow some spirit will trip the big switch and the technology that's been repressed for the last 70 years will suddenly be ours and it'll be a better place to live, a beautiful place. Maybe I should send my spirit guide over to Edgis 1 and stop it from going online so that Jennings can't fuck you and your people out of your land and your way of life forever. See, I love the spirit world and your father, but that doesn't matter right now. What really matters is the cold, hard reality of this world. That's what we've got to deal with. I didn't want to resort to violence. I don't have a choice, and I'm not taking any chances this time because I can't." End quote.
And then after this scene, he immediately goes to the room full of guns.
Yeah. What does he say, Anton? He's like, what was it? He's like, what have I always said? When you got to blow it, blow it.
You gotta
What?
blow it hard.
And that's where this movie comes apart, officially. I mean, it was already horrible before this, but I was trying to figure this out. It's like, I think the point she was trying to make is the one that I think every person that watches this movie realizes. We're like, if you blow up one of the largest oil refineries in the world, wouldn't it cause a catastrophic oil spill? Reasonable to assume.
Or a fire that won't go out.
Right. It seems like his speciality was like putting out fires. So it's like maybe
Didn't seem like it.
no. I also like how his only skill as a fire putter outer is just like he just places some explosives somewhere. Remember he shows up in the beginning. They're like, "Oh, thank goodness, Forrest is here." He just puts like one piece of explosive on
the background dialogue. Yeah. Oh, he's here. We're good.
Yeah, we're good. He does one thing, just blows up one little thing, and everyone's like, "Yeah."
So watching that scene again, I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna do that thing where like the explosion puts out the fire. Is that like a trope from these movies, or is that a real thing? A controlled explosion will extinguish the fire because of some reason I remember when I'm a kid.
I've heard of fires controlling other fires, but I don't know about explosions controlling.
I think there's some basis in reality. I know that when there is some kind of an oil spill and they want to cap an oil well, they do blow something up to cap it. But I don't. It didn't look like that's what this was. So it probably, I mean, knowing Steven Seagal, no, this has no basis in reality. Also, wouldn't blowing up an oil refinery make him a literal terrorist? The FBI is there during the climax. So when he's making the speech at the end to that crowd, it's like, do they know that he blew up the oil refinery? Like, wouldn't he be a criminal?
Just a good plot hole. Another is we've gone through many lengths, and there are many lengths in this film to convince us about how much of a tough guy Forrest is. How good is he at fighting?
Please read some.
How in tune. Oh, man. Of course, there's a wonderful quote. He trains the trainers.
That's a callback to Casey Ryback from Under Siege.
He's the kind of guy that would drink a gallon of gasoline just to piss on your campfire. That was a fun one.
There was one I liked that actually, looking at just the quote, if Arnold had delivered it, would have been a classic Arnold, like up there with your luggage.
Which one?
The one where he goes, where he shows up right at the beginning in his French coat, and his first line is like, "What's cooking?"
What's cooking?
Yeah, like I can hear Arnold delivering that along with, the like, "You're fired" at the end of True Lies.
I'm telling you, this would be a decent movie with Schwarzenegger in it. I really do think so.
But that's all on running just on charisma.
Oh, you know what line of his that was just a complete gem? For $350,000, I'd fuck anything once.
It's not bad, actually. It's pretty good money in 1994. What is, I have a couple more Arlie Ermy quotes. You can drop this guy off in the Arctic Circle in bikini underwear without his toothbrush, and tomorrow afternoon he's going to show up at your poolside with $1 million smile and a fistful of pesos. If he reaches this rig, we're all going to be nothing but a big goddamn hole right in the middle of Alaska. And then he tells the Native American character, I want you to protect this center like it's your sister's cherry, Tonto. Is that his actual name, or is his character supposed to be racist?
I think it was because his character is supposed to be racist.
Well, he's good at playing a racist, Arlie Ermy. So that bar fight, we're bouncing around here, but that's in some ways the highlight of the film, because I feel like if is the bar fight the most Steven Seagal scene that Steven Seagal's ever been in?
Yes, because we get full on Aikido, we get bones breaking, we get people dying. Pretty sure, like, they don't know confirmed kills, but for sure people died.
I had that as a question. Does he like murder an old man? Did you notice this in like HD? Like several of the stunt people were like, they looked like senior citizens. I don't know if that was intentional or if they were just the only people available that day.
They wanted it to be authentic to who would be in a bar in Alaska.
It's fair. That's a good point, Tom. I'm sure Seagal like explained that when he cast him in the film. There's just random brief slow motion shots of guys leaping on him and getting grabbed by the nuts.
Well, actually, Tom, it's to your point. They had to actually do the slow-mo, otherwise they wouldn't be able to capture
It would have been
Steven
too
Seagal's.
fast. Yeah.
They wouldn't have been able to capture those flips. I'm also a practitioner of Aikido. I studied in my youth, so perfect form.
Hey man, don't be fucking with the oil workers. It's like that guy looks 75, and isn't Seagal an oil worker?
Seagal is an oil worker. That's one of the biggest nits to pick with the whole movie. There's so many, but that's one.
Anybody else want to play with Cupcake? Have either of you seen the clip from his cop show where he's trying to train the cops? And it's pretty awkward. He's like, now if a criminal comes at you, I want you to get behind them. And he's using a cop as like a demonstration. It's pretty funny. Sort of reminded me of this because it's all awkward.
He's not uncomfortable. It's awkward for everyone else.
Yeah. The cops looked uncomfortable in the scene.
Have you guys seen the videos where Steven Seagal is showing Aikido demonstrations and just everyone coming at him, he's just flipping them?
They're like falling away. Like they don't even touch him. It's just a little flick of a wrist and they're...
I think that's from Russia, right? He was like at some like martial arts competition in Moscow or something.
Demonstration.
Yeah. So this bar fight, it's so cartoonishly one-sided. I ended up feeling bad for Mr. Big Balls, Mike Starr. Somehow, even Seagal succeeded in making that awkward. Like when he just starts doing the hand slap game with him and he's hitting him, you're just like, geez, man.
And you feel bad because he's just punching down at that point.
What does it take to change the essence of a man? And we get that music and like Mike Starr is just like, I need time to change.
Just starts bawling.
He just pats him on the shoulder and walks away.
What was that part? Like the fight was watchable. That part was uncomfortable. And why did he even need to have a response? Why couldn't Seagal just say that and then let him go in silence and pat him on the back and walk away? If he's trying to show like his caring side, right, that he didn't finish him.
It was clearly supposed to be some kind of like social statement from Seagal, like in addition to the environmental thing, like you have to understand what I did in that scene in the bar is I conquered prejudice.
If it's Seagal trying to say even our enemies that we try to fight in bars are flawed humans,
They can change.
and we should
Yeah.
show them mercy.
But you need time to change.
You give them enough time, but then you start blasting them with shotguns.
Well,
Right.
doesn't Seagal say "me too" when he pats him on the back?
I think he does.
He
Yeah.
says, I wrote that down, so I think he does because
Yeah,
the
me too.
response is, "I need time to change," and he says, "Me too,"
It's just even more confusing.
to show that he's flawed.
I also wrote down he's smoking the little cigars like joints in the bar. He's just like
Yep.
he's trying to
We're all
hide it.
making
It's like, I'm not sure why. You could still smoke in bars at that point in Alaska. You probably can still smoke in bars in
Probably
Alaska
still can.
for all I know. I was shocked by the level of violence in this. I knew these older movies, like they have some pretty graphic violence, but
Oh yeah,
this is some of the most over-the-top squib work since RoboCop.
That's what reminded me of like 70s, early 80s horror movies. Was just the violence.
There's like Friday the 13th level kills in this film.
yeah.
But it wasn't dark though. It was well lit.
It was still very cheesy effects though.
Oh, the action in this film is not good at all. Like we talked about it earlier, there's no tension. He's just shooting his way through the refinery like he's playing a video game on like beginner mode.
Mm-hmm.
He's hitting guys from like 50 yards away with a shotgun. It's crazy. There's no boss fight either. I was expecting him to fight Arlie Ermey's character.
No.
I was like, oh wow, they're gonna have at least there's gonna be some kind of a like badass fight. Like remember at the end of Under Siege when he fights Tommy Lee Jones, and it's pretty cheesy, but it's a memorable fight. They fight each other with like steak knives. Nothing like that here. That's what this film needed, like some kind of final boss fight at the end of this movie. And it's like, no, he just blasts his way through, and that's it.
That's what the studio was going for, right?
I think so.
They wanted more
yeah.
fights, and that's what was missing. And Seagal wanted the message.
Yeah, it's
One more bad line was the Arlie Ermey one where he goes, "How do you want them delivered?" Oh, I see. There's not even a long enough pause to like interpret a reaction. Oh, I see. That's it.
I wonder if there was supposed to be a fight with Michael Caine, and like Caine just refused to do it, and that's why they just drop him into the oil because like they wrap that up pretty quick.
Yeah, the final third of the film, it wraps up really, really quick. Got to save enough room for the speech at the end.
You do. I wrote this down from Roger Ebert because, as usual, he puts it so well. He said the film is, quote, limited to two basic qualities. It's violent and it's sanctimonious, end quote. It's like, yep, that's it.
Yep.
Well, we're saving the best for last here because we can't talk about this film without talking about the Eskimo dream sequence.
That was uncomfortable.
It ruins the pacing of the film. Anton, I agree with you. It's uncomfortable. And the other part of it is I have not a clue what it was trying to do.
Show that Forrest was in touch with his spiritual side, and that is why he's aligning himself with the natives in Alaska.
But he had to choose in the dream sequence between like an elderly shaman type of woman and like strippers.
You could see Steven Seagal's flair in that, trying to tell that message.
What did that symbolize?
Hedonism versus earthly delights. Oh,
I think the stripper probably represents the oil refinery. I think that's. I thought at least that part of it was clear.
Because
I'm kidding. I don't think that.
I think we're trying to find some deep meaning that's out there.
No, there's none.
They wanted to put some gratuitous nudity in there and needed a dream sequence.
It's one of the stranger things I've ever seen in any type of movie like this.
What's the alternative? Like a strip club scene for the first fight?
It would have been more appropriate than that.
Would have been less uncomfortable.
The bar fight is like almost reminded me of like, you know, the bar scene in like Airplane.
Mhm.
When it's like the flashback where the main character like meets his girlfriend and they're playing like the Bee Gees. Like that's what it kind of reminded me of, and it shouldn't have because that's not what you want in a film. It's like almost like a Roadhouse bar. The dream sequence, if you had taken that out and you put Schwarzenegger or somebody in this is probably a pretty decent action movie. But neither of those things is what this film is.
Yeah, there's no way that you would get like a similar film. And I think there's something fun about that because you couldn't have just put in Schwarzenegger with this film while Steven Seagal's directing and writing because there's no way he would have let anyone else be the lead other than himself, right? So presumably you take this script, you have a different director. It's just another, 90s action film. But instead we got an oil refinery explosion level bad film.
We got an environmental and cinematic disaster. Although it would have been funny to see Arnold deliver the end speech. That would have been worth it. Like, come on, Cohagen, give these people air. Jennings, you son of a bitch. All right, I don't have anything else to add. This has been we haven't dunked on a movie like this in a while, Anton.
Yeah, this one is this is not only a slam dunk. I think this was one of those kid level sized hoops where
I was gonna say it's not even an 8-foot hoop.
All right, we can wrap this up then. Tom, as the guest, would you like to go first?
I'm happy to. I don't know that we could cover much more that was not great about this. I said my favorite part was probably in terms of the acting was John C. McGinley. The second and maybe only other redeeming quality of this movie I thought was the soundtrack, because it kept reminding me of RoboCop.
Same guy.
And those two things are not nearly enough to give this anything other than an F.
Yeah.
I don't even need to go on.
No.
That's, if there were a funny way to give it like an F minus, I would give a lot fewer F minuses than F pluses, but that's it.
I'm glad you mentioned the score, because I liked the score too. Basil Poldoris is his name. Yeah, decent score.
He's got a decent resume.
Oh,
The score is one of and like, not that I liked it, or again, not redeeming quality, because it could easily be stock footage. But in the start of the movie, the wildlife, the scenery looks nice. That's well filmed. Only that one first scene though.
The opening
Everything
credits.
after that. Yeah, the opening credits. So you got the opening credits. You got a character actor who's got some charisma. Maybe just reminds me of Scrubs. And then you've got the score reminding me of another movie I like. So there's nothing actually redeeming.
Just stuff that reminded you of other stuff you liked more.
Yeah.
What does McGinley say when they're torturing the old man? He's like, there is no I in team.
Yeah, he does say something like that.
Oh, it's so weird when he's just ranting.
His delivery's good. He's good at being the prick. Character actor.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. McGinley, it's such a weird... McGinley on steroids too, like looked like he was actually literally on steroids.
Oh yeah, big. Yeah.
He had that neck that you see a lot of like athletes have in the mid '90s that just mysteriously has gone. He has the Barry Bonds neck, basically. You mysteriously don't see that anymore in athletes.
He was still looking pretty jacked on Scrubs.
Yeah, but this was like he was.
Oh, this was the peak of it, probably.
This was the peak of it. Did I like this film? Absolutely not. This is a horrible movie. It's not anywhere near as enjoyable as Seagal's earlier work. Anton, I really liked what you said earlier. This is probably his worst movie. It's almost so bad that it's good, but there's not really enough in it that I enjoyed that I would ever really want to watch this again. I would say one positive about the film, if I'm searching for anything, what you mentioned, Tom, the score I thought was good. I found it weirdly not boring apart from the Eskimo dream sequence. I thought if you take that out, like the pacing was decent. None of it really dragged, but that's not enough to elevate this in really any kind of a way that you'd want to recommend it. There's no tension in any of the action. Even Michael Caine's performance, it's not even enjoyable enough for me to like say that's a saving grace. Like he has some funny lines here and there when he yells at people, but it's such a phone-in job from him. There's a reason why Seagal was never allowed to direct anything again. He sucked at it. I would say the only reason I would possibly ever recommend this to someone is if they hadn't seen a Steven Seagal movie before. This is the most Seagal movie there is, and I would recommend it for that reason, but no other reason. This is a terrible movie. It's an F. But like we were talking about earlier, it's not even the bottom of the barrel. He was capable of so much worse. F.
We've already went through every single reason why this film is bad. So to avoid having a bloated response that could turn into a 7-minute monologue to end a film, I'll just say this is as Seagal as it gets. This is the most sincere essence of a Steven Seagal film in every way. This film is terrible. Don't waste your time. This is an F, and that was on deadly ground.
I want to amend something I just said, because if you haven't seen a Seagal movie, I wouldn't recommend this to you. Just watch a clip from this on YouTube. That's really all you need to see. Right? There's no reason to waste 2 hours of your life.
We didn't even go into this. There's a lot of boring moments in this film.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't remember being bored watching this. I just thought it was stupid.
It was fast-paced, but yeah. Could you say that we've flogged this movie enough with a fossilized whale penis that we can put it to rest? Is that too on the nose?
No. I'm glad you mentioned that because I thought to mention that earlier, but I couldn't remember what they were beating the old man with.
That's it.
Yeah, and then that's it for On Deadly Ground. Tom, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. I was not sure we would. I mean, I knew we had plenty of stuff to say, but I was not sure it would be so fun or so enjoyable to flog this movie so much. But
Well,
it's enjoyable.
this is a movie that requires you to get off topic a little bit.
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of depth here. Well, the next time we have you on, it will hopefully be for a much better film. I think we talked about a Bond movie for you, which is always super fun to talk about.
It's pretty low bar there for it to be a better film.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good point. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna have you on again soon, Anton. We got one more episode to record this season, and then we are done for season 5. That's Harry Potter.
Yeah, we're headed to platform 9 3/4 to.
That's right.
Make sure to make it to opening ceremony at Hogwarts.
That is right. All right, well, we will see you next week on Why Wasn't It Better? I think the next episode that listeners will be hearing is Thor, The Dark World. So take care, everyone. Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better? If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.